Welcome to KCA Production, your home for premier African storytelling and entertainment. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to KCA Production for more amazing content. From the sun-scorched desert of the Sahara to the vibrant streets of Lagos, African cinema has been telling powerful, unforgettable stories for over 6 decades. Today, we're counting down the top 40 African movies of all time, spanning 1960 to 2026, covering 20 countries and representing every corner of this magnificent continent. Let's go. At number 40, we have Cairo Station, 1960, directed by Youssef Chahine. Cairo Station is a groundbreaking Egyptian crime drama and jewel of Africa's earliest cinematic era. Set entirely within the chaotic energy of Cairo's main railway terminal, it follows Kinawi, a lonely obsessive newspaper vendor, who develops a dangerous fixation on a beautiful refreshment teller. Chahine himself plays the unstable protagonist in a bold, raw performance. The film blends neo-realism with psychological tension, capturing Egypt's social tensions and the clash between tradition and modernity with remarkable depth. Considered Egypt's greatest film, it was selected for preservation in the Library of Congress, a masterwork from Africa's golden age of cinema. At number 39, we have Borom Saret, 1963, directed by Ousmane Sembene. Often cited as the first film ever made by a black African director, this short masterpiece follows a humble cart driver navigating a single exhausting day in Dakar. With no money and mounting misfortune, his journey becomes a stark portrait of post-colonial poverty and inequality in urban Senegal. Sembene, often called the father of African cinema, uses a neo-realist style influenced by Italian cinema to reveal how ordinary people are crushed beneath systems built against them. In just 20 minutes, Borom Saret laid the philosophical and artistic foundation upon which African cinema would be built. At number 38, we have Black Girl, directed by Ousmane Sembene, the first sub-Saharan African feature film to receive major international acclaim. Black Girl tells the devastating story of Dior Anna, a young Senegalese woman who travels to France to work for a wealthy family she served in Dakar. What she imagined as opportunity becomes a suffocating trap of isolation, exploitation, and erasure of identity. Sembene's film is quiet, but absolutely shattering, a meditation on colonialism, dignity, and the cost of displacement. It won the prestigious Prix Jean Vigo in 1966 and remains one of the most important films ever made anywhere in the world. At number 37, we have Soleil O, 1970, directed by Medj Hondo. An audacious and experimental debut, Soleil O follows a Mauritanian man who arrives in France in search of work and a better life, only to face racism, rejection, and bureaucratic cruelty at every turn. Medj Hondo blends documentary, animation, surrealism, and sharp political satire into one blazing cinematic statement against colonialism and racial injustice. It screened to major acclaim at Cannes International Critics Week in 1970 and won the Golden Leopard at Locarno. Decades before conversations about systematic racism entered mainstream discourse, Soleil O was already shouting the truth from rooftops, bold, inventive, and essential. At number 36, we have Toki Boki, 1973, directed by Djibril Diop Mambety. Toki Boki, meaning Journey of the Hyena, is a groundbreaking avant-garde masterpiece about Mori and Anta, two young lovers in Dakar who desperately dream of escaping to Paris. Their chaotic, surreal attempts to raise money for the journey became a wild ride through fantasy, rebellion, and disillusionment. Winner of International Critics Award at Cannes 1973, the film is now considered a canonical work of world cinema, influencing filmmakers from Beyoncé's visual albums to Ava DuVernay. Its refusal to follow Western cinematic rules was itself a radical act of African creative independence. At number 35, we have Xala, 1975, directed by Ousmane Sembène. Xala is Sembene's biting satirical masterpiece about El Hadji, a corrupt Senegalese businessman who takes a young third wife, only to be struck with Xala, a cause of sexual impotence on his wedding night. What unfolds is a wickedly funny, yet deeply critical squaring of Africa's post-independence elite, who adopted Western suits and briefcases while abandoning their own people. Sembène uses El Hadji's humiliation as a metaphor for the moral bankruptcy of the African bourgeois. Smart, fearless, and impossible to forget, Xala remains one of cinema's greatest political comedies. At number 34, we have Sedo, 1977, directed by Ousmane Sembène. Set in an unnamed African kingdom, Sedo depicts the dramatic clash between an ancient royal community, the Sedo, or commoners who resist religious conversion, and the encroaching power of Islam being imposed by an ambitious imam. When the princess is kidnapped, a battle of tradition, faith, and power erupts. Sembène's most controversial film, it was actually banned in Senegal for years over its religious and political content. Visually stunning and thematically courageous, Sedo dares to ask hard questions about identity, cultural survival, and who gets to define a people's spiritual life. Masterful filmmaking with real stakes. At number 33, we have Harvest, 3,000 Years. Made in 1976, directed by Haile Gerima. One of the most powerful and under-celebrated African films ever made, Harvest 3,000 Years, is an Ethiopian drama about a poor peasant family toiling in feudal servitude under a cruel landlord. Director Haile Gerima, part of the Los Angeles School of Black Filmmakers, crafted a film that burns with quiet rage at colonialism and class oppression. Shot on location in Ethiopia with non-professional actors, it uses long silences and hypnotic imagery to build a portrait of endurance and exploitation. It's considered one of the finest African films of the 1970s and a watershed in diaspora filmmaking. At number 32, we have The Gods Must Be Crazy, 1980. It's a South African Botswana movie directed by Jamie Hughes. When a Coca-Cola bottle falls from an airplane into the Kalahari Desert, a sand bushman named Z concludes that it must be a troublesome gift from the gods, and sets out to return it to the age of the world. This charming, wildly inventive comedy became one of the highest grossing foreign films in history, blending slapstick, satire, and genuine affection for the Sand people. It offered global audiences a fresh, joyful window into African life. Though not without its cultural critics, The Gods Must Be Crazy remains a beloved classic that made the world fall in love with African storytelling. At number 31, we have Yilin, meaning brightness, 1987, made in Mali. Directed by Souleymane Cissé. Yilin is a breathtaking mythological epic set among the ancient Bambara people of Mali. It follows young Niankoro, whose father, a sorcerer of tremendous power, has prophesied his son's death and is hunting him across the savannah. Niankoro must discover his own magical gifts before their inevitable confrontation. Winner of the Jury Prize at Cannes 1987, Yilin was a historic breakthrough for African art cinema. Cissé created a distinctly African cinematic language rooted in oral tradition, spiritual belief, and the visual splendor of the landscape. It is pure, mythical cinema unlike anything produced before or since. At number 30, we have JIT, 1990. Directed by Michael Rayborn. JIT is Zimbabwe's most beloved film, a feel-good romantic comedy that became a cultural phenomenon across Southern Africa. The story follows UK, a lovable young dreamer who falls hopelessly for the beautiful Sophie, but must prove himself to her family. His journey involves run-ins with ancestral spirits, street hustlers, and unexpected hilarity. Named after the lively Zimbabwean music style that pulses through its vibrant soundtrack, JIT is pure, infectious joy. At a time when few African countries had a cinematic identity, Zimbabwe gave the world a film that celebrated everyday people, love, music, and the human spirit. At number 29, we have Sango Malo, 1991, directed by Basek Ba Kopio. Sango Malo, meaning the village teacher, is a passionate and stirring Cameroonian drama about a young idealistic school teacher named Malo, who arrives in a rural village determined to revolutionize education by teaching children practical life skills rather than Rod's colonial curricula. When his methods clash with corrupt authorities and rigid tradition, the consequences are severe. Based on a true story, this film is an African classic that celebrates the transformative power of education while exposing the forces that resist change. It is a quiet, dignified film with enormous moral power and emotional weight. At number 28, we have Sarafina, directed by Darrell Road. Set in the explosive streets of Soweto during apartheid, Sarafina follows a spirited young schoolgirl who dreams of performing for Nelson Mandela, then imprisoned on Robben Island. When her beloved teacher is arrested for political activism, Sarafina is drawn into the fire of 1976 student uprisings. Starring Leleti Khumalo in a magnetic lead performance alongside Whoopi Goldberg, the film is equal parts musical and political manifesto. Adapted from celebrated stage play Sarafina, electrified global audiences, remains the definitive cinematic portrait of young black resistance against apartheid's brutal machinery. At number 27, we have Courtier Mozart, 1992, directed by Jean-Pierre Bicolo. A wild genre-bending debut that puts Cameroonian cinema on the international map. Courtier Mozart follows a young girl who uses magic to inhabit the body of a young man in a working-class Yaoundé neighborhood. What unfolds is a sharp, witty, and deeply feminist exploration of gender, power, and sexuality in urban Cameroon. Bicolo's film moves with the chaotic energy of the street it portrays, parts fable, part social satire, part comedy. It established Bicolo as one of Africa's most inventive directors and announced Cameroon as a force in African filmmaking. Playful, provocative, and ahead of its own time. At number 26, we have Sankofa, 1993, directed by Haile Gerima. Sankofa means go back and fetch it in Akan, and this haunting historical drama does exactly that. A modern-day African-American model, Mona, is transported back in time to a Louisiana slave plantation where she becomes Shola, an enslaved woman forced to confront the brutal reality of slavery and the ongoing trauma it carries. Garima's deeply personal and political urgent film was initially blocked from mainstream distribution, yet screened to massive grassroots audiences across black communities in America. Sankofa is a film about memory as resistance, one of the most emotionally powerful African diaspora films ever committed to screen. At number 25, we have Hyenas, Ramatu, 1992, directed by Djibril Diop Mambety. Based on Swiss playwright Frederick Dürrenmatt's The Visit, Mambety's Hyenas is a darkly brilliant fable set in the fictional Senegalese village of Colombane. Lenguare Ramatu once poor and shamed, returns as one of the world's wealthiest women and offers the village a fortune in exchange for one thing: the life of the young man who wronged her in youth. The village's slow moral collapse as they choose money over justice is chilling and uncomfortably universal. Mambetti's visual poetry, sharp wit, and devastating moral intelligence make Hyenas one of African cinema's supreme achievements, haunting long after the credits roll. On number 24, we have Carmen Gay, 2001, directed by Joseph Guy Ramaka. A bold, sensual reimagining of Bizet's classic opera Carmen. Carmen relocated to Dakar, Senegal. Carmen Gay follows an irresistible, freedom-seeking woman who escapes prison, only to destabilize every life she touches, including that of the female prison guard who falls obsessively in love with her. Ramaka's film pulses with tabla drums, vibrant color, and a sexuality that was radical in its Senegalese context. It is one of the first African films to explore queer desire with openness and complexity. Carmen Gay is cinema as liberation, a film that dares the world to watch Africa on its own terms. At number 23, we have Abona, Our Father, a Chad movie directed by Mohamed Saleh Haroun. Abona is a tender, quietly devastating Chadian film about two young brothers, Tahir and Amine, who are abandoned by their father with little explanation. Their desperate search for him, believing they have glimpsed him in cinema film, becomes a profound meditation on absence, longing, and the hunger of paternal love. Haroun's direction is restrained and poetic, finding heartbreak in small details: a passing football, a whisper between brothers in the dark. This was his second feature, and this announced him as one of Africa's great cinematic voices, a film of immense tenderness and emotional depth. At number 22, we have Mouladi, 2004, a Burkina Faso movie directed by Ousmane Sembene. Sembene's final masterpiece, Mouladi, is set in a Burkina Faso village where Kole, a courageous woman, invokes a magical protection, Mouladi, to shield 4 young girls from undergoing female genital mutilation. What begins as one of the women's acts of conscience ignites a village-wide battle between tradition and human rights. Ranked among the 100 greatest films since 2000 by 177 critics worldwide, Mouladi won the UN Certain Regard Prize at Cannes. Vibrant, furious, and deeply compassionate, it is Sembene's ultimate statement on African womanhood, a film that honors women while indicting the systems that harm them. This is truly undeniable cinema. At number 21, we have Hotel Rwanda, 2004, directed by Terry George. Based on the true story of Paul Rusesabagina, a hotel manager who sheltered over 1,000 Tutsi refugees in his Kigali hotel during the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Hotel Rwanda is one of the most emotionally powerful films ever made about Africa. Don Cheadle delivers a towering performance as a man caught between survival instinct and moral obligation while the world looks away. Sophie Oquendo earned an Oscar nomination as his wife. The film brought the horror of the genocide to global attention and sparked worldwide conversations about international responsibility and the cost of silence. Heartbreaking and absolutely essential. At number 20, we have Tsotsi, 2005, directed by Gavin Hood. Winner of the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, Tsotsi follows a cold, violent young gangster in Johannesburg's township who hijacks a vehicle and discovers a baby strapped in the back seat. Suddenly forced to care for this helpless child, his hardened exterior cracks open, forcing him to confront the buried trauma that made him who he is. Based on Athol Figure's novel, the film is creeping, tender, and ultimately redemptive. Its portrait of post-apartheid inequality and the cycle of violence and poverty in South Africa's townships remains urgently relevant. Tsotsi earned South Africa its greatest cinematic honor. At number 19, we have The Last King of Scotland, directed by Kevin MacDonald. Forest Whitaker delivers one of cinema's most mesmerizing performances as Idi Amin, the brutal, charismatic, and terrifying Ugandan dictator who ruled through fear, charm, and unpredictable violence in the 1970s. Seen through the eyes of a young Scottish doctor who becomes Amin's personal physician, the film is a claustrophobic and hypnotic portrait of absolute power. Whitaker won the Academy Award BAFTA and Screen Actors Guild Award for his performance, widely considered one of the greatest films in history. The Last King of Scotland is a pulse-pounding historical thriller that brought you authentic, deeply uncomfortable truth. At number 18, we have Ezra 2007, directed by Newton Aduaka. One of Nigerian cinema's most important films and Africa's entry for the Oscars in its year, Ezra is a powerful drama about a young boy adopted and turned into a child soldier during Sierra Leone's devastating civil war. Years later, Ezra appears before a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and his story unfolds in fragmented flashbacks, violent, haunting, and impossible to dismiss. Director Newton Aduaka refuses easy answers, showing how children become weapons in wars they never chose. Raw and psychologically complex, Ezra forces viewers to grapple with guilt, trauma, forgiveness, and the impossibility of returning to innocence after war. At number 17, we have Viva River 2010, directed by Joe Tonda Wamunga. Set in sweltering, neon-lit streets of Kinshasa, Viva River is a full-throttle crime thriller about River, a hustler who returns home with a truckload of stolen fuel. An almost supernatural comedy in a city starved of power. Desire, greed, and danger swirl around him as gangsters, soldiers, and a seductive woman all close in. The film announced DRC Congo on the Global Cinema app and won multiple African Movie Academy Awards. Kinetic, sexy, and morally complex, Viva River proved that African genre filmmaking could rival anything produced in Hollywood. Electric cinema from start to finish. At number 16, we have Nairobi Half-Life 2012, directed by David Tosh. Kenya's first ever submission for the Academy Awards, Nairobi Half-Life follows Moaz, an ambitious young actor from rural Kenya who arrives in Nairobi full of dreams and is immediately robbed, beaten, and forced to navigate a city that chews idealism alive. To survive, he falls in with a gang while still chasing his dream of performing on stage. The film's genius is in holding both worlds simultaneously, crime and art, survival and ambition, without letting either off the hook. Gritty, beautiful acted, and shot with the raw urgency of the city itself, Nairobi Half-Life is East Africa's finest cinematic statement. At number 15, we have Half of a Yellow Sun 2013, directed by B. Bandele, based on Chimamanda's celebrated novel. Half of a Yellow Sun sweeps through 1960s Nigeria as Biafran war tears the country apart. At its center are two educated sisters, played by Thandiwe Newton and Anika Noni Rose, whose lives, loves, and political convictions are tested by one of Africa's deadliest conflicts. Chiwetel Ejiofor brings tremendous depth to his role as an idealistic professor. The film confronts the violence, passion, and heartbreak of a war that claimed over 1 million lives and is still rarely discussed in global cinema. Emotionally rich and historically vital. At number 14, we have Timbuktu 2014 rather. Mauritania, Mali is where the film was shot, directed by Abderrahmane Sissako. Nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, Timbuktu is Sissako's devastating portrait of the 212 jihadist occupation of the ancient Mali city. Rather than showing war spectacle, Sisako shows its absurdity. Fighters who ban music and football while barely understanding their own rules. A community of devout Muslims who simply want to live. The tragedy depends quietly until it becomes almost unbearable. The film is visually stunning, profoundly humane, and politically urgent, one of the finest films produced anywhere in the world this century. It confirms Sisako as one of cinema's true masters of restraint and empathy. At number 13, we have Felicity, 2017, directed by Elaine Gomez, winner of the Silver Bear Grand Jury Prize at the Berlin International Film Festival. Felicity is a film of raw beauty and immense emotional force. Set in Kinshasa, it follows a proud, fierce, independent single mother and bar singer who tears through the city trying to raise money to save her injured son's leg. Vero Chada Beya's performance is extraordinary. A woman carrying a world of pain with her chin raised, Gomez blends realism with ethereal sequences that feel like the city is dreamy. Felicity is cinema that lives under the skin, vibrating with music, grief, and the stubborn will to survive. At number 12, we have The Wound, directed by Jean Trengove. The Wound is a fearless and visually stunning South African film set during the Xhosa initiation ceremony, a sacred secretive rite of passage into manhood. When a young urban man arrives for his initiation, his relationship with his seasoned guide, Zolani, reveals a hidden forbidden tenderness between them. The film dares to explore queer desire within one of the most rigidly masculine cultural traditions in Africa. It sparked intense controversy in South Africa and was initially attempted to be banned. Nonetheless, it screened at Sundance to international acclaim and won multiple major film awards, quietly devastating and courageously honest. At number 11, we have I Am Not a Witch, 2017. Directed by Rungano Nyoni. When a young orphan girl is accused of witchcraft in a Zambian village, she is taken to a government witch camp and tethered by a white ribbon to a large pole. A surreal, Kafkaesque symbol of powerlessness. Rather than protest, she silently accepts her fate with unnerving composure. Rungano Nyoni's extraordinary debut blends biting satire, magical realism, and social critique into something entirely its own. It won BAFTA's Outstanding British Debut and screened at Cannes. I Am Not a Witch is a film that treats African folklore and injustice with equal seriousness, and the result is unforgettable. At number 10, we have Rafiki, 2018. Directed by Wanuri Kahiu, the first Kenyan film to screen at the Cannes Film Festival. Rafiki is a tender and visually intoxicating love story between two young women, Kenna and Ziki, in Nairobi. Bursting with color, music, and the electric joy of early love, the film is set against a backdrop of political rivalry between their families. When the relationship is discovered, the consequences are swift and brutal in a country where homosexuality is illegal. Kahi's refusal to deliver a tragic ending was itself an act of defiance. Banned in Kenya upon release, Rafiki became a rallying symbol for LGBTQ+ rights and freedom of expression across Africa. At number 9, we have Atlantics, 2019, directed by Mati Diop, the first film by a black female director to win the Grand Prix at Cannes, the festival's second highest award. Atlantics is a January-defying Marvel set in Dakar. When a group of young men disappear into the Atlantic Ocean while migrating towards Europe, their spirits return to possess the women they left behind, seeking justice before they can rest. Part ghost story, part love story, part migration tragedy, Atlantics is ravishingly beautiful and profoundly sad. Mati Diop made history with this film and announced a fearless new voice in world cinema. Its images, the sea, the fire, and the unblinking eyes of women stay with you forever. At number 8, we have Eyumofe, This Is My Desire, directed by Eri and Chukwu Esiri Eyumofe. meaning this is my desire in Yoruba. It's a quiet, devastating Nigerian film about two ordinary Lagos residents, a factory worker and a hairdresser, each secretly planning to escape to Europe in search of a better life. Shot in luminous 16 film stock that gives Lagos a strange nostalgic glow, the film is structured in two parallel chapters that gradually reveal how their worlds intersect. Winner of the Silver Bear at Berlin, it avoids melodrama entirely, trusting small moments to carry enormous emotional weight. Eyumofe is a masterclass in restraint and is arguably the finest Nigerian film of the 21st century. At number 7, we have The Grave Digger's Wife, 2021. Directed by Kada Ayedris Ahmed, selected as Somalia's entry for the Academy Awards and premiered at Cannes Critics Week. The Grave Digger's Wife is an enchanting love story set in Djibouti. Good and gentle gravedigger features a man named Khaled, who is desperately trying to raise money for kidney surgery to save his wife, Nasra's life. Their love, warm, warning, and absolute anchors a film that could easily have been grim, but instead shimmers with humanity. Kada Ayedris Ahmed crafts a film that is profound in its simplicity. A man loves a woman, and that love is worth everything. It is among the most beautiful films to emerge from the Horn of Africa. At number 6, we have Lingui, the Second Bond. Directed by Muhammad Saleh Harun, Harun's most urgent and fierce film yet. Lingui follows Amina, a single mother in Jamena, who discovers her teenage daughter is pregnant and seeks an abortion. A procedure both illegal and religiously condemned in Chad. The film is stripped down to its moral core, a mother's love against an entire social structure. Achina Musa's performance is unflinching and extraordinary. Shot with handheld intimacy and a muted color palette, Lingui finds beauty and defiance in the smallest act of courage. A feminist masterwork, it screened at Cannes 2021 and proved once again that Harun is among cinema's most essential living directors. At number 5, we have Saloum 2021, directed by Jean-Luc Hebilot. Saloum is a genre-bending Senegalese action horror thriller that arrives like a bolt of lightning. Three elite mercenaries, the Bangui Three, flee a coup in Guinea-Bissau with a drug cartel stash and take refuge in a remote Senegalese tourist camp. But something ancient and vengeful lurks in the salt flat around them. Herbulov fuses West African mythology, supernatural horror, and sleek action filmmaking into something wholly original. Winner of the Audience Award at Fantastic Fest and celebrated globally, Saloum proved that African filmmakers can dominate any genre and that ancestral forces make for formidable antagonists. At number 4, we have Banel and Adama, 2023. Directed by Ramata Tolesi, a hypnotic and tragic love story set in a remote Senegalese village bordering the Sahara Desert. Banel and Adama follows a young couple consumed by love so total it becomes destructive. Banel is fierce, relentless, and unwilling to be shaped by village expectations. She wants the couple to move into abandoned houses on the outskirts of the village. As trial descends and community suspicion grows, the obsession with each other pulls the village towards ruin. Selected for Cannes' main competition, this debut feature is visually extraordinary, every frame luminous with heat and desire, a haunting portrait of passion, freedom, and consequence. At number 3, we have Mami Wata 2023, a Nigerian movie directed by CJ Obasi, shot entirely in breathtaking black and white. Mami Wata is a visually ravishing Nigerian fantasy film steeped in Igbo mythology. On an isolated coastal village completely cut off from the outside world, the community reveres the water spirit Mami Wata through her earthly vessel, Mama Efe. When Mama Efe falls mysteriously ill, a stranger washes ashore, and a battle for spiritual authority, female power, and community identity erupts. Winner of the World Cinema Special Jury Award at Sundance, the film is both an aesthetic triumph and a profound meditation on faith, womanhood, and tradition. Mami Wata announced a new era of mythologically rooted African genre cinema. At number 2, we have Ogure 2023, also called Omen, directed by Baloji. One of the most visually stunning African films of the decade, Agura follows Kofi, a young Congolese man who returns to Kinshasa with his pregnant Belgian wife to seek his mother's blessing before their child is born. There, he is branded as a witch and confronted by a family and society that has always treated him as cursed. Interweaving four characters, all branded as social outcasts, director Baloji, a celebrated musician filmmaker, creates a film that is simultaneously a deeply personal family drama and a fierce statement against superstition and cultural exclusion. Selected for the Cannes on Certain Regard section. Visionary, bold, and completely original. At number 1, we have Totem, The Princess and the Sacred Totem, 2024. In this gripping 2024 Nollywood epic, tradition collides with destiny in the village of Umudim. When the princess comes of age, a sacred totem is placed in her hands to choose her husband from a circle of eager suitors gathered by the gods. As she circles the men, thunder cracks and the heavens intervene, shattering custom and igniting chaos, forbidding love, and the fight for power. Starring Regina Daniels alongside Nollywood heavyweights, the film blends rich cultural rituals, supernatural twists, and high-stakes drama, a vibrant celebration of African folklore and faith. It delivers spectacle, emotion, and timeless lessons on heritage that kept audiences hooked across the continent. And there you have it, 40 African movies of all time spanning 1960 to 2026. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to KCU Production for more amazing content.